Hey everyone, welcome. If you're new here, my name is Mary from therosehomestead.com, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you a new sourdough bread recipe, but I like to call it my cheater sourdough recipe, so stay tuned. So this is a recipe that I found on King Arthur's website. I'm going to leave a link down below so that you can go print it off if you want to try this recipe as well. I'm going to be using 100% freshly ground hard red wheat. You can use obviously any type of flour, but I try to incorporate just as much whole grains as I can into our bread. So I'm going to heat up 1 1/4 cups of water to just lukewarm. You don't want it hot, just lukewarm, and then we're going to get started in the mixer. So what makes this recipe a cheater recipe is the addition of just a little bit of instant yeast to give it a really nice rise. When you're working with whole wheat and whole grain, you sacrifice a little bit of the rise, and that little bit of yeast added to this really kind of speeds things along and gets it much fluffier. Now, if you are a sourdough purist, you will snub your nose at this recipe, but I'm not. I'm okay adding just a little bit of yeast, especially in the cooler times of the year when it takes so long for sourdough to rise sometimes, and it can get really sour and, you know, sometimes a little overpowering. So if you're not a sourdough purist and you want a really nice loaf of sourdough bread, this may be a recipe that you want to add to your collection, as I did. So I'm going to add 1 1/4 cups of lukewarm water to my mixer. To that, I'm going to add 1 cup of fed sourdough starter. I get questions a lot about whether I use my sourdough starter straight out of the refrigerator, and I do. I keep it in there all the time. I just feed it, let it get really bubbly and active, and then it goes in the fridge. And then when I need to feed it again, I just repeat that process. So this is straight out of the fridge, but the lukewarm water helps kind of jumpstart the rise. Okay, so I have my water and my starter. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil, or you can use melted butter, coconut oil, or even some avocado oil, or just whatever you have. I'm going to do a tablespoon. Actually, the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of honey or agave syrup. I'm going to do 2 because I'm using 100% freshly ground. I want to give it a little more sweetness. Alright, so to that I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of the flour. This recipe, let me check real quick, calls for 3 cups of whole wheat flour. I never do, I don't just add 3 cups of flour to any bread recipe or whatever. I like to add the flour until it's the right consistency and it's not sticking to the sides of the bowl, because humidity and temperatures and all that plays a part in how much flour you're going to need. So I always recommend people to get used to what a good consistency of dough looks like, and don't just throw 3 cups in here because it may be too much sometimes. So I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And here's where the cheater part comes in. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of instant yeast. Now I'm going to start this and just let it start combining, and then I have all of my flour here with a scoop, and I'll just keep adding it in until I get the consistency that I'm looking for. So now that I have it at the right consistency, I'm going to let it knead for probably, sorry, got my camera all messed up. It's got flour all over it. I'm going to let that knead for 10 minutes because I want to really develop the gluten. And then I'm going to shape it and just put it in a loaf pan to rise. It usually takes maybe 2 to 3 hours to rise. But I'm going to go ahead and let that go for about 10 minutes and then we'll come back and get it in the loaf pan. Sorry it's loud, but I want to give you a little tip. When you're down to the last few seconds with your dough in the mixer, if you drizzle just a little bit of olive oil in there, it is easy as pie to get out of the bowl and you don't have all that stuck to the sides when you're trying to get it out. So I'm gonna go do that real quick because it's almost done. I got my loaf pan ready. I had somebody ask about this. It's a 1 pound loaf pan. It's a USA pan and I've been using it for a long time. And so what we're gonna do is spritz just a little bit of oil on here. I do this, you've seen me do this many times already. I just get the dough out. So I just spread it out. I hope that's bright enough. There we go. I just spread it out in kind of a rectangle and then I pull the sides in on each side. And I kind of tuck these ends in just a little. The whole point, like I said in a recent video, is just to make sure there's not a bunch of air bubbles, really big ones. You can even roll this out. There was a big bubble. You can roll it out. I actually just ordered a small rolling pin for this particular task, but I'll make do today. You just want to get it back out. That looks pretty good. And then I just start rolling it up, tucking as I go and pulling. You want it tight. Now the reason that I slap it on the counter a couple of times is to make sure all of those air bubbles are out, because you don't want to cut this open after all this and have this huge hole in the center. So I'm just going to cover this and let it rise until it tops the pan. And when I see it getting to the top of the pan, I'm going to go ahead and preheat the oven to 350 degrees. I'm going to put this in the oven. It's just came over the top of the pan. The thing with 100% whole wheat loaves of bread is you would much rather underproof than overproof. So if it tops the pan, as you can see, that's plenty good enough for me. So I'm gonna stick this in the oven, preheated to 350 for 35-40 minutes, and then we'll get it out. Take a look at it. So I know I do a lot of bread recipes. I'm just like a really big bread baker. I like trying all different recipes. I'm not a sourdough purist. I am more of just a baker, and I just enjoy trying different recipes. So you see that rise? It's hard to get with 100% freshly ground wheat without a little bit of yeast in there, so that's why I love this recipe. It turned out beautifully. I'm going to brush some clarified butter on top of this and let it cool completely before I slice into it and show you what's inside. Alright, we're going to slice into this bread. Looks perfect. So that is a pretty easy recipe to make a sourdough loaf if you're looking for one that maybe you have a young sourdough starter and it's not rising really well, but you want it to be so fluffy. Adding that teaspoon of instant yeast, you get a beautiful fluffy loaf of bread, and you still get to use your sourdough starter. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy videos like this, cooking from scratch, gardening, food preservation, and homesteading, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. I make 2 new videos every single week, and I would love to have you here. Also, check out our website, therosehomestead.com, and our Instagram page. I will link down below. I will also link the recipe for this bread on the King Arthur website so that you can print it off and hopefully give it a try for yourself. So, all right, well, we will see you on the next video.